All right, I think we are all here. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Giorgia. I'm Senior Marketing Manager at Ubisoft Future Games of London. Our studio is the proud owner of the Angry Shark franchise, and well, very honored to be here today with Arnaud, Clayton, Dominik, and Siiri. I'll pass it over to Arnaud for a quick intro, and then we go through one-on-one.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks, Giorgia, and thanks for everyone else to be here today. I'm Arnaud Fayolle. I'm a AAA game art director, now working for Ubisoft Positive Play. We're a transversal team tasked to evaluate and amplify the positive impact of video games on players, on society, and on our planet. I'm also one of the founding members of the International Game Developer Association Climate Special Interest Group, or IGDA Climate SIG for short, a grassroots community of game developers, academics, and climate scientists across the world passionate about using video games to tackle the climate crisis. And we have great people like Clayton here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Clayton Whittle. I guess I have a much more eclectic background. I am a researcher at Penn State University, specializing in games for environmental education and climate psychology. I'm also the environmental game design playbook lead, a project lead from the IGDA Climate SIG, and I am also, as I said, eclectic. I am also the manager of online learning at the Sustainable Forestry Institute. And I believe Dominik is next.
Yeah, probably throwing it around. Okay, yeah, hello, I'm Dominik. I am a game designer at Ubisoft for the Anno franchise, which is created in Mainz in Germany. And I work for Ubisoft for 7 years now. That's also the time I'm in this industry overall. And for 2 years, or more than 2 years, I'm now a game designer here. Before that, I was tester. And yeah, and we did the Green Game Jam part for Anno last year. And yeah, and I'm here to talk about this. And then I would give to Siiri.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. Very nice to be here. My name is Siiri Mäkelä and I work for the UN Environment Program. I lead our work with non-formal education partners, including youth organizations and the private sector as well. And I also coordinate the Playing for the Planet Alliance, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Back to you, Giorgia.
Well, I wanted to give a quick intro about why do we think video games have a role to play in the fight against climate change. Maybe, Siiri, you want to start with that and then we can chip in?
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll say first that us for the United Nations, why we want to work with the video gaming industry. Mm-hmm. So first, I think it's because the reach, it's really unbeatable. We know that today 1 in 3 people in the world are playing video games, and no other medium reaches as deeply as gaming industry, also across all the geographies. And the second would be maybe the scale of this sector. So I'm sure you all know that the video games industry is the world's biggest entertainment medium. It's massive, and also its growth potential is exponential. And of course, as a growing industry, it also has its environmental impact. So there is a lot of potential that can be also harnessed for the environmental agenda. And I'm sure you also know that games also wins people's attention like no any other medium. So people use more time playing games than they use for news, social media, music, for example. And then fourth, I think maybe the most important is that we, of course, need kind of all hands in deck to tackle the planetary crisis we are facing. So the video gaming industry really has the ability to engage and inspire and captivate the imaginations of billions of people across the world, which makes them, for us, a really important partner in addressing the climate and environment crisis. For example, the Green Game Jam that we organized, that was facilitated by the Playing for the Planet Alliance. We had 40 game companies participating. We saw super innovative activations in games related to reforestation, sustainable food production, So through the massive reach of gaming industry, we really want to explore how we can inspire people to learn and act for the environment.
Absolutely agree. To be honest, I think we are very lucky, and we are in a privileged position where we can effectively inspire our players and our fans, and our games and brands can effectively make the difference. Like, we have, an easy way to reach and approach an audience that otherwise is quite niche and complicated to reach. And I think once brand effectively start working on sustainability topics, then players actually engage with those. On this sentiment, Arnaud, maybe you want to talk about what are the ways that games can effectively address the environmental issues?
Yeah, for sure. So in so many ways, actually, games are rich and complex systems that weave the elements of gameplay and technology with narrative and aesthetics into compelling experiences. And these four disciplines, even though they're usually handled by different people with different skill sets, they can all contribute to addressing environmental issues in their own unique way. The narrative and aesthetics, they share similar toolset as the cinema, for example, such as the message of the game, which can help us describe climate change as a legitimate threat to humanity, like they did in Horizon Zero Dawn, when rising sea level is the main cause for the whole storyline, or restoring trust in each other to foster culture of collaboration, like in Sign of the Sojourner, which goes against the popular misconception that everyone will turn against each other if times became hard. Then you have the emotional impact, how we leverage the aesthetics code to amplify the message and make sure it reaches the player's heart, so it affects them personally and trigger actions. It works with feel-good aesthetics, like in Terra Nil, or with unsettling ones, like in Final Fantasy VII, where the oppressive Midgard became some kind of ecological wake-up call for a whole generation of players. After all, like Tony Kate said, the role of the artist is to make revolution irresistible. And together, narrative and aesthetic can use visualization to show players what may be difficult to imagine on their own, such as what would a sustainable future look like in Overwatch or any Solarpunk universe, where we represent world in which humanity has already acted to solve the climate crisis. Representation is just as powerful. By representing nature's beauty, we can help players reconnecting with it, like in Raiders Republic, which has been built with this very purpose in mind. And in a word, it's about to give players a vision to consider, to think, yes, this is what I want, or no, this is definitely what I don't want, and help them steer their life in the direction they want. Then when we introduce gameplay into the mix, we multiply the opportunity for positive impact. We can sprinkle our games with explicit or implicit call to action, point player towards specific pro-environmental actions they can take, both virtually or in the real world, like Hungry Shark World have been doing for years, where they're campaign to ban shark fin trade. We can also point players to things they can either do on their own or as a community to amplify their impact, like in Ghost Recon Breakpoint, where they collectively contributed to plant nearly 600,000 trees in the real world last year. And gameplay alone can also shape players to become better person. When we make players repeat an action in game, they can become habits. And when the context and the personal values are aligned, habits acquired in the game can transform into real life. We call it behavioral transference, and it can take many forms, from building emotional resilience in Spiritfarer, or questioning our own preconceptions, like in Spec Ops: The Lines, or experiencing the simple joys of doing good deeds, like in Alba Wildlife Adventure, for example. And finally, with the help of technology, games have become so good at simulating the real world and all its complex interaction that they can allow players to experiment with each component and draw their own conclusion. And this is by far the best possible way for someone to understand complex systems, such as human societies and ecosystem in the game Echo, or climate change in Civilization 6 or Humankind, without feeling like you're in a school class. And more importantly, it makes it possible to understand long-term consequences of our actions in much shorter time frame, and without the stress of making life-threatening mistakes, like Dominik here and his team did in Anno 1800. So these are just a few examples of the creative tool game maker can leverage to address environmental issues, but it really shows how everyone in any dev team have strong cards in hand to play within their area of expertise.
Absolutely. I think I loved the overview that you've put here, and it's true. Like, any game can effectively be talking about the environment. It doesn't matter the settings. Obviously, it's easier if your game is already about environment settings, but otherwise there are always ways to connect to players on that sense. sorry. Didn't mean to cut you short, Arnaud.
No, go ahead.
If we want to go into a more technical side of things, Dominik, do you want to talk about the maybe gameplay mechanics and how they've been used for green activations?
Yeah, so quick overview. So what we so Anno is a city builder, which basically means from an interactive standpoint, you get a blank slate of land, and then you start developing it, building farms, building houses, building factories, and getting more and more complicated. 1800, of course, had an industrialization theme. So we started with peasant farmers and went up to industrialists and basically giant smokestack behind us. So even in the game, in the main gameplay, or in the main game, apart from the game jam, we already had mechanics that comment on how dirty your city is and how much pollution you produce. But because it was in the 1800, the result was just that the people didn't like it very much and didn't visit as much, so we wouldn't have much tourist income. And then for a Green Game Jam, we thought, okay, how can we actually make this a bit more, still in a simplistic form, of course, but how can we make it more engaging and more realistic? Well, realistic in the sense of gamifying it. And what we did was, for the Green Game Jam, you had one island. Normally you have multiples. You had one island, tropical, nearly a paradise, but we already had industry there that was decrepit and had already a negative impact. And the island had health bars. And we set it up into ground health, the air pollution, and the sea around it. And those things then the player had to balance. So if they started to fish, they impact, of course, the quality of the sea. If they started to farm too much, they would start impact the quality of the soil. And so this is how we used our core mechanics we already have, but they had to more think about how they interact with the environment. And what also helped is that our artists did a great job of communicating how the island looked, because if you normally have in a video game a health bar, at some point you get more bruises, or if you have a car, it gets more bumped. But in this case, the environment just started to look more and more impacted. So we had all the trees were losing foliage if you overdid it with the soil pollution, and if you overdid it with the sea, you had an algae bloom, and even more fish were disappearing. And this looked really, really impressive. And then the player basically had cause and effect. They built giant factories, and suddenly the air is unbreathable. And it was the link. And then it's really straightforward if you have a city builder game, because you can basically do this whole civilization against nature thing directly, and then pack on top mechanics that then comment on it. And also for the first time, I know it's actually hard to lose, but if you overdid it, it was just the one island became inhabitable, and it's like a small microcosm. I think that is a mechanic we basically used for visualizing this and have the player interact with the environment directly.
Really impressive, really impressive. Clayton, maybe we can use your skills to tell us about what are the psychological implication or reasons why this mechanic effectively works for our players.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into that. So when I talk about kind of why games have such a strong impact and what their real value is, I like to try to break that into, rather than addressing it from games, is what an individual human needs and what a community needs. And how games can address that. And from an environmental education and environmental psychology standpoint, a person needs to become a positive actor in the environment. They need knowledge. They need like the correct attitude, like a motivation to do it, and they need to feel powerful. And games have proven time and time again to be uniquely strong in helping players reach those points. A game, any game really, is an education machine that's teaching you how to do something and then measuring your ability to do it. That's what a game does. And so it's really, really powerful at teaching what we refer to as action-oriented knowledge, which is the most important, because action-oriented knowledge kind of teaches us not that climate change is a problem, but what I personally can do to make a change. what I personally can do every single day. Games, from a narrative standpoint, are extremely powerful in helping, I think, as Arnaud pointed out earlier, helping behavioral learning and affecting attitudes and helping people identify and empathize with situations that normally are outside of their experience. And that allows people to connect with nature and connect in a way that more and more is very real, meaning being able to go out into the world and games like Pokemon Go or other sort of mixed reality games that and really establish a very real connection with nature by being in it. And then finally, self-efficacy, this idea that I'm powerful, I'm an agent of change, is something that games are very powerful at creating. People need to feel like their actions matter. I can know what I need to do. I can have the motivation to do it. But if I recycle every day and I see my neighbor throwing all of their cans just in their yard and then eventually in the trash and not recycling, I feel like I've lost my power. Games empower people because they're usually the agent of change in the game. They're powerful. And games can empower communities because more and more games are connected to social sphere that can utilize a player base in game or out of game to take real actions or to feel powerful within a game. And so those are usually when I try to talk about why games are effective tools for environmental education. I really try to hone in on those three really critical elements of climate psychology that games can address. Then there are, of course, many specific ways that games can help. But I think that's sort of outside of the scope of today's conversation.
Yeah, of course. But honestly, like it's nice to have an overview around the why. But equally, is there anything that doesn't work? Like that's what works and why? But do we have, in your experience, anything that it won't work?
Yeah. If someone were to ask me, what should I not do if I'm trying to create an environmental education game? I think, the first advice is don't feel limited by gamification, right? Adding points to something doesn't make it a game. And I think we here know that academics tend to forget that. And trying to just slap environmentalism on top of a game that doesn't really include environmentalism isn't effective. And I think the example of Final Fantasy VII is a beautiful counterexample in that the climate theme wasn't just on top of it. It was really critical to the story. And so the integration is critical. And then finally, and this is if you remember one thing that I say, if everything else is just static in the background, I think the most important advice I could give to game designers and researchers in this field is that awareness by itself, just telling people, hey, environmental issues are a problem, and then not teaching them why and not teaching them how they can be effective, not only is that not helpful, it's actually damaging. If I tell you, hey, the forest is dying in your local area, your state, your country, whatever, the forest is dying, and that's the end of it. I don't tell you anything else about what you can do and what your role in this is, then you feel disempowered, disenfranchised, and it's kind of a impending doom feeling that people get, and they tend to fight or flight. They flee because they feel like they can't do anything about it. And so I think what not to do is to not scare people without giving them a helping hand, because that's what the game is there for, is to help them move from awareness to action. And I don't know, it's a big concept. Giorgia, would you be okay if I linked Arnaud and I, the IGDA, created this big document that explains all this in detail? Is it okay to link that in the chat?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, because I can ramble for hours about all this stuff, but it might be easier.
I think it would be fantastic, even also for the people that are here to listen to us, to kind of have some resources to go through afterwards. And I think it's fantastic to, obviously, knowledge without action points means nothing, and it leads to nothing. So while it's fantastic to educate players, there has to be, it's amazing when games can find a real life connection with what we have been talking about it. It does make total sense. Arnaud, do you wanted to jump in quickly?
Yeah, it's on the topic of what should the game developer not do is an important thing we realized over the year accompanying teams who wanted to make green games is that the whole game don't need to be about the environment.
Yeah.
Every game can address this topic, and it's a chance we don't have to focus only on environment because it can be counterproductive. First, because all the game will start to look the same and nobody would want that. And also because environment and climate change are such broad topics that would probably just end up scratching the surface and telling generalities about it. And we don't want that either. We can do much more. We can be more meaningful with our games. So while it's true, developers should strive to understand the big picture, they must then figure out where does their game fit in this picture? What does our game has to say about it? So in game development, every game dev spend a lot of time carefully identifying what makes their game USP, so unique selling point. Well, I believe every game also have a UIP, unique impact potential. And a game UIP can be determined by looking at its theme, the context of the world building, the core gameplay, and even their target audience, and whether they play solo or as communities. And then we can figure out whether the game is more suitable to inspire players to live more sustainably, or to transform the society around them, or to resist against destruction of our life-supporting ecosystem. And a good news is that the UNEP already made it easier for us by breaking down the problem into 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And so an easy first step would be to look at them and ask ourselves, which one seems to be about my game? And so the game won't solve the game. We won't save the world on its own, but with more than 10,000 games being released in the world every year, surely we can cover all 17 SDGs collectively and inspire a better future together. So I think the bottom line is that every game can be a climate game in their own way without compromising the wonderful diversity of experience that our players love. And because green games are not a genre, it's a desired outcome, and every game can strive to reach it.
For sure. Honestly, could never agree more. But since we are on the developers and challenges and audiences, I don't know, Siiri, I wanted to ask you what you feel like as part of as a little bit external. We all work in the game industry here. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think the challenges for the developers are, and what we should be doing? We should all cohesively doing in a different way to effectively approach the situation.
So I think in addition to encourage companies to integrate these green activations, environmental education into their games, one of the main goals of the Playing for the Planet Alliance is also to support and help the games industry to decarbonize, so to reduce their carbon emissions. And I think one of the challenges is also related to this, and especially to the scope 3 emissions, which are the indirect emissions, which are a bit more harder to measure. So how do we measure scope 3? Where are the boundaries of software and hardware? Where do they stop? Where do they start? So this has been an issue that has been raised up, and we are working on it within the Alliance to try to kind of define some common principles on how we can measure this to make it easier for everyone. And then I think related to like environmental education, green content in games, I think developers might also be thinking kind of what is the tolerance and appetite for this green content in games. So do people want this? Is this something that players like to see in games? And then I think perhaps one of the challenges is kind of move away from the kind of NDA mindset. So how the industry can be collaborative, open-minded. But of course, it kind of takes a while to shift the culture. But what I think is important is that common problems, they need common solutions. So, for example, what I mentioned about the scope 3 emission challenges is something that needs a collective approach. So we need a common definition what it is so that we can measure and then reduce it. Also, the green activations within our green game jams that has been organized within the Alliance, we are collecting information on players' perspectives on the activation, whether this is something that they think add value and possibly how their behavior will be changed after seeing the content, after playing the games. And this is pretty much the aim of the Alliance, to shift from competition to collaboration on this agenda.
I mean, two things. There are a couple of things that kind of make me think about where we can go next from this that you said, Siiri. Being marketing, like the first question that comes to my mind is like, will the game sells? And then you mentioned the green game jam. So as I worked on the Angry Shark World side of things. We first participated to the Green Game Jam in 2020 with our games, where we basically designed an extinction Arctic level. The extinction mode effectively aimed to share with our players the effect of the melting polar ice cap that was having through in-game. And then we clearly showed how that was impacting the game dynamics, the gameplay, and effectively like the whole world outside the game. The campaign result was fantastic. It showed that players were amazed by the fact that they could effectively have a positive impact through their gameplay on making the difference for the level. In the same year, and right after the Green Game Jam, we did release a survey aimed at like targeting our current players and asking them like what their perception of the update was. We asked questions like general survey questions like, what do you like about Angry Shark? Would you recommend it to our friends? But amongst those questions, we also asked more, we added hints around what do you feel Angry Shark is? And well, obviously 50% of the players answered, oh, well, a mobile game brand. Obviously, no surprise, we are a mobile game brand. Fantastically, 10% thought that we were a marine or NGO company, which we are not, but because of our work with NGOs and sustainability brands, they kind of like connected us to that. Additionally, we asked what they wanted to see more from us. So what they wanted to see more, like in terms of like, what do we want to do? What should we do next? 10% of them said that they wanted us to do more charitable work related to conservation of the marine ecosystem, which is fantastic. So even just by asking the questions, they already connected the dots. So in my humble opinion, I think that games would sell. And as Arnaud said, you don't need to make a whole game around sustainability. It kind of like there are the small actions sometimes, small, very direct, very clear actions with a clear goal that can make the difference for our players. Dominik, do you have any experience on this? Like, what's your experience on this actually?
Yeah, so overall, on our side, the players really reacted positive to the Green Game Jam and to all the content we gave them. Of course, on top of that, it was a free content update. So, of course, they liked it that they had more things to play with. We also, what's really interesting was that we were already in our second year of post-launch. So people were really good. Some people were really good at playing the game. And then giving them an extra challenge, with having environmental issues to actually address. They were accepting it and were saying, okay, now let's see how far I can get with like the hard mode of making sure that not the entire forest is dying. And we also saw a few really good players like going straight for their normal tactics and ran into a wall. But they immediately, okay, this is what I'm not supposed to be doing, and I'm not supposed to diversify my crop fields to not have all the same thing next to each other. And that already worked. And yeah, what also helped is that we then later on, if you have won it, basically, if you have established your island and your settlement and reached a certain growth and built a sustainable energy source for all the people living on the island, You could also then get rewards that were then added to the main game. So people got challenged, and then got a reward for it. And meanwhile, had to interact with the new systems we gave them. So overall, they liked it. And yeah, the good thing again, Anno is really good. We could give them literal trees as rewards to plant in the game again. So that also came full circle in the end. So
you feel like it's something that they would be happy to kind of commit to, like if you were to plan something around it, they'd be engaging with.
Yeah, but Anno overall, it's also like the current Anno is the 7th Anno, and the 5th already had a similar fight between heavy industry and ecology in 2070, and the name is always a date, so that was in the future. This one is set in the past. So long-time fans already knew that Anno fits a bit, that the Anno core gameplay loop can really support this kind of messing with these issues. So that also helped. So we were already started running on it when we started the Green Game Jam for this. Yeah.
So you and I basically had the very similar experience in two different games with two completely different target audience. But Clayton, what do you think about like the inspirational side of the green work that we are putting in games?
That's a really huge question,
I know,
to be honest.
It's very wide.
I think, and I thought really hard about this when we brainstormed some questions for this panel, but I think that when it comes to will this game actually work, I want to echo kind of the sentiment that we've been talking about for the last sort of 10 minutes, is that will this game work is an extension of what is my impact goal. And if you want to know if your game is going to work, if it's going to have the impact you want and it will inspire behavior, you need to really precisely define your goal, because there's no such thing as a game that changes you from I don't care about the environment to I'm Captain Planet all of a sudden. That game doesn't exist. It can never exist. Environmentalism and inspiring behavior is a factor of long, complicated lifetime of experiences. And if you're trying to just inspire behavior, the question is, what's my behavior and how can I address it? And if you feel like you can inspire that behavior outside of changing someone's identity, then you do have a good shot at that. And I think some really wonderful examples have come out of some European researchers and game designers in the last 5 years of tying behavior to direct benefit, like saving money or getting access to coupons, or the direct impact that your real world actions are going to have on your day-to-day life, because it's your backyard that this is affecting. But the big answer is, will it work? It is a function of what's my impact goal, and can I make it small enough to be certain that I can measure success? Because any impact goal that gets big, it's like any feature bloat, right? Yeah. The more it blows up, the more resources, or the fewer resources you're spreading across a bigger goal, the more likely you are to not achieve what you're looking for.
So keep it smart, small, measurable, tangible.
Keep it smart, exactly.
Got it.
And also bribe people, because if that definitively works. They've shown time and time again.
I see there are lots of questions about leaderboards on the chat. Maybe we can touch on that in a minute. But before we kind of jump into Q&As and questions, I wanted to lastly ask Siiri, what are, from an outsider point of view that works a lot with developers, what is your suggestions? What are the advice that you would give?
Thanks. Before I answer to that, I think it might be useful to say a few words about what the Playing for the Planet Alliance is, so we can also encourage then you to join us. So the Alliance, we launched that in 2019 in the UN Climate Action Summit in New York. It is facilitated by us, the UN Environment Program, And we launched this with 19 members, and now I think we have more than 40 members. So we are growing quite fast, and we have huge console companies like Sony as our members, and also mobile companies like Cybo and Supercell, and of course Ubisoft as well. But also we have smaller indie developers on board. And when a company joins the alliance, they need to make specific and measurable and hopefully also time-bound commitments that are related to integrating this green content, environmental education into their games, and also reducing their carbon emissions. And indeed, these are the main priorities of the Playing for the Planet Alliance. So to decarbonize the gaming industry, and also support gaming companies to use their games as a medium for environmental messaging and action. And then we also have some kind of special initiatives. For example, at the moment, we are working with Sega and exploring how we can support companies to reduce plastics that is used for packaging of PC and console games. And within the Alliance, we have organized 3 of these green game jams to explore this, how we can inspire players to take environmental action through existing games with existing audiences. And I think we have reached like 130 million people with our member companies, and also planted like more than 2 million trees. And what I personally think is really cool about the Alliance is the fact that it's about collaboration. So these companies who are our members are some of the kind of biggest competitors in the market. But within the Playing for the Planet Alliance, they come together and collaborate and share best practices on how to deliver on the environmental agenda. So back to your initial question, what can be done? If I have any suggestions, well, I would say join the Playing for the Planet Alliance, join the Green Game Jam. I think the main point is just, don't worry about getting it wrong, but kind of give yourself a chance of getting it right. Already there are so many good tools out there. For example, the UK's Green Game Guide. Also new papers coming up from the Alliance this year. And I think there's also like a strong community of practice coming together around the green activations, around the decarbonization. So really good materials to learn from other companies as well. And we, as the Playing for the Planet Alliance, are here to help and support. And lastly, I think what is important is kind of build a network within your studios that unlocks the change. So collaborate with your colleagues on this. Don't walk this journey alone, but with others.
I have to admit that working with the Playing for the Planet Alliance and also the Green Game Jam through these past few years, including this year for Angry Shark World, has been challenging but very interesting, and we got a good recognition by our players. So I would agree that it is worth it. It's worth the time, and it's fun. It can really be fun while you are experimenting with sustainability and also educational content. We have a young audience in our game for our brand, so maybe it makes it easier for us to kind of work on this front, because children, they are more willing to listen, or to, they're an easier audience in this sense. But I would agree that definitely is worth it. We have a little bit of time, so I was skimming through the questions on the chat while we were talking, and there are a couple of back and forths about leaderboards. Someone loves them, someone hates them. I don't know if we want to touch on that. Maybe Clayton, you want to take on this one?
Yeah, I could do that. I will say that the first thing to remember is that it's always situational, right? To say leaderboards. And I think people are pointing out in chat, there's a lot of ways to define that. Competition can take many different forms, but as a rule, research is showing more and more that competition has to be pretty closely managed, because direct competition can actually push people who are environmentally inclined away from a product. Why, we don't know yet, but we do know that in several different instances, in several different demographics, that's proven true. That said, competition, that's direct competition, right? Like, I see this person is doing better than me and that I'm doing better than this person can force people to shy away. But there are lots of ways that collaborative competition, where we're all working together to win something. And I think someone's already mentioned that we need to get away from zero sum, is what they said. And I think that's a really important note on competition, is that we're kind of all in this together. And while we can compete in that we are like trying to save the world as a goal, we can still compete with ourselves and to improve ourselves and get better at being at pushing towards this goal. I think that answers it. I'm trying not to say anything as if it were a fact, because at the end of the day, I'm a researcher and I try to shy away from universal statements.
No, it does make sense. But while we were chatting, I found another question that could be interesting, which I've lost now. Nothing, ignore me. So it all goes back to the competition, like, don't make it competitive, make it appealing, make it easy for players to engage with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't see anything else on the chat. Anyone has any questions?
I can see there's one interesting question in the chat.
Yeah.
When Andrew is wondering what everyone's thoughts are on AAA games that are explicitly about climate change or disaster,
Yes.
like the Horizon series. Can games like that focus people on being more aware and willing to engage with topics like climate change or sustainability if used in any effective way? I think this is very interesting. So can games like that can help people learn about climate change? Say definitely yes, and games are best for that, because to learn you need two things: you need time and attention, and games are the best medium to keep people's attention on a prolonged amount of time, like Siiri was saying in the beginning. So yes, it's a good topic to learn about that. So then on how we make player want to come to this game and learn about this, it's all rely on the aesthetics I was mentioning a bit earlier. By leaning on aesthetics rules, you can create either a feel-good experience or an experience that will ignite your curiosity, make you want to know more about it. So the aesthetic can push yourself into the game, and then the game can deliver its message. Finally, how we can make people willing to engage in the real world after that. I think it's all about like Clayton said, not only showing climate change and saying this is really bad, but also showing a vision of what should people be doing, what would it work, what would it look like when people are acting, and how are they acting. I think this is this vision that people can make them own and act toward.
Yeah, and honestly, it tied what you said, Arnaud, to the question that I had missed. Apologies for that, which was about given the opportunity to go outside the gender norms and also like to be able to enjoy it. There was a couple of back and forth, as I said. Our audience in game is quite young, so it's quite diverse on that front. But do we want to maybe touch on that social side of things with how sustainability can kind of fight the norms and kind of become more globally recognized and easy for people to jump in and play? All right, I'll take that as a no.
I'll talk. I just don't want to. I see a bunch of questions in there that are like maybe in the chat that are maybe my expertise. But I wanted to
jump on that one. My chat is stuck, so yeah, feel free.
Oh no, your chat is like, okay, sure. I will, because we're limited time, I hope no one minds, but there's some rapid fire questions I think I can answer. We had what feelings are best at inspiring action? And that's what I actually know. There's a lot of science behind that. The hope is really, really important. Making people feel like there's a good future. Agency, a feeling of power is really important, and connection to nature. And that's the one that I think a lot of educators forget. And it's something that is really becoming much more popularized in environmental education outside of games, is that people need to feel like they're part of their environment, and that can be physically going out. It can be seeing how they're connected as part of a system, or it can anything that makes people feel like I am connected to the forest and the forest is connected to me, or watershed, whatever. So sorry, rapid fire, try to get through some of these because I don't want people to have lingering questions.
This floats also into the next question, right? If the dystopian games are, how's it called? Perhaps dystopian games about climate change undermine hope and reinforce a sense of doom. So I think if you give the people a chance to actually fix some parts of the dystopia, that already helps. Because I mean, humanity got itself into this mess, so we can also get out of it, because it's like it's cause and effect, and so even if times are dire, there are ways to get out of it. So I think if you give the people a way out, even if it's hard to do, I think it can help, and then it's definitely the sense of achievement then overshadows the hopelessness of the situation, if you want to go.
Yeah. And also to piggyback on what you're saying, it's not only about the context of the game, like the dystopian background and storyline, but it's also about what is the player doing within this context. A game I quickly mentioned earlier was Signs of the Sojourner. It's a like a puzzle game about relationships and communication. It's really good. And it's the background of the game is like a climate disaster, but they never really mention climate disaster, but it's very explicit. But in the game, you're not mourning about climate disaster or pretending, oh, everything is lost and stuff. The game is focused on the relationship between people, and it's full of heartwarming emotions. And you feel good in this game, even though the context is terrible. We're talking about resource scarcity, water scarcity, terrible heat, and everything. Whole cities that have been evacuated because they were run out of water and everything. But the storyline, what the players do, and the relationship he has with the people he meets, are very heartwarming and give you hope. Actually, that even in the face of the disaster, humanity will probably be okay.
Yeah.
Or at least our sense of humanity.
Yeah. Can I real fast? There are two questions that I think I can answer both of them with one sentence.
Yeah.
I'm a researcher though, so it'll be a long sentence.
Right.
So we had how important is incorporating real data versus general ideas, and we had how can we understand complex systems within a game. And I would say, first, incorporating real data and real information is critical because people need to transplant that information to their life. And that's part of that. Give people something they can do. And a wonderful example of that, not necessarily environmentally oriented, is oxygen not included. I have never seen a game that incorporates so much real world scientific data up into the point of like, how heavy is helium versus carbon dioxide, and then absolutely teaches you how to handle massively complicated scientific systems. So, sorry, and then I'll shut up.
No worries. Thank you for doing that. And also thank you everyone thank you to our panelists for also helping me out with my tech issues on the chat and for attending this panel. To everyone that spent time asking questions and listening to us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.
Please make green games.
Please
yes.
make green games.
More games.
The world needs it.